Breaking news, dated January 1st, 2026. Two new German Patriot systems now protect Ukrainian cities. That's right. Two Patriot air defense systems, just delivered by Germany, are already operational, protecting Ukrainian cities and absolutely critical infrastructure. That's according to a report from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. Subscribe to Defense Reports. It's your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. I'm Alex.
And I'm Aria.
Join us in the latest deep dive by Defense Report for a sharp, no-nonsense breakdown of the latest in global defense news, military technology, and strategic developments. And today we are covering what might be the most critical turning point in European security planning since the start of the war.
We really are. We're going deep into the huge financial and military commitments that Europe is making right now.
And these are commitments so profound that they are fundamentally shifting the relationship between the U.S. and its allies.
That shift is absolutely real, and it's speeding up. We're dissecting Germany's, staggering new aid package, Ukraine's request for $120 billion in defense funding for 2026.
And the development of a multinational force designed to secure Ukraine's post-war future.
So the big question for you is, what does all this mean for Russia? And, maybe more importantly, what are the risks involved in Europe taking on this new independent military leadership role?
Okay, let's unpack this right away. We're starting with the hardware that's on the ground now, the Patriot systems, and a brand new industrial plan Germany has just unveiled.
The deployment of these two new Patriot systems is huge news. Germany had already provided 3 batteries.
Right.
And these 2 new ones, delivered by the end of 2025, with help from Norwegian partners, showed just how urgent this is. Air defense is the single most critical need.
And it's important for you to understand why the Patriot is so critical. It's not just any anti-air system. This is the U.S. Army's main anti-ballistic missile system.
It's designed for the highest-end threat.
Exactly. We're talking aircraft, yes, but also ballistic missiles, even the really fast ones, the hypersonics.
Things like the Zircon or the Kinzhal, which can reach, speeds of up to 11 or even 16,000 kilometers per hour. The Patriot is really the only system that can reliably counter that.
And its track record in Ukraine is proven. We've seen credible reports of it intercepting Russian missiles and even shooting down advanced aircraft like Su-34 fighters from almost 100 miles away.
And that capability, that long-range threat, forces Russia to completely change how it operates near the front lines. It creates a massive no-fly zone for their best assets.
You mentioned the urgency, and the numbers are they're hard to get your head around. In just 1 month before this latest deployment, Russia launched over 5,600 drones.
And more than 180 missiles.
All aimed at civilian infrastructure.
Precisely. So heading into winter, this kind of robust air defense isn't a preference. It's about national survival. It's about keeping the lights on.
And for those of you who want the technical details, it's worth knowing we're talking about modern variants, the PAC-2 and PAC-3.
The PAC-2 is great against larger targets like aircraft. It uses a blast fragmentation warhead. But the real silver bullet against missiles is the PAC-3.
Why is that?
Because the PAC-3 is a near-total redesign. It's optimized for what's called hit-to-kill.
So it's less of an explosion and more of a direct impact?
Exactly. Think of it like a high-speed bullet hitting another bullet in midair. It uses pure kinetic energy to just obliterate the incoming warhead. That's what makes it so effective against advanced ballistic missiles.
Okay, but this level of technology is incredibly expensive, which brings us to the money. How do you fund this long-term?
That is the $100 billion question, literally.
Ukrainian Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal put a number on it. He said Ukraine needs a staggering $120 billion for defense in 2026 alone.
And the really critical part of that is the ask. He requested that partners cover half of that, $60 billion.
He also urged allies to commit at least 0.25% of their GDP to military support. That might sound small, but for large economies, that is a huge continuous financial output.
And that leads us to the mechanism Europe has created to handle this, called PURL.
The Prioritized Ukraine Requirements List.
Right. It was set up in July 2025 to streamline getting critical U.S. weapons, like those Patriot interceptors or HIMARS rockets, to Ukraine.
But what's so clever about PURL is how it's funded.
The U.S. isn't paying for it directly. The mechanism lets NATO allies and Canada pay for the weapons, and the U.S. just expedites them from its own stockpiles.
So Europe is using its financial power to bypass any potential political gridlock in Washington.
It's a massive step towards strategic autonomy, and it is working. We saw
Mm.
about $2 billion worth of gear allocated through PRL since August 2025.
And the list of participants is solid. The Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Germany, Canada, Finland just joined too.
But there's a problem, a funding gap.
A pretty alarming one. Data showed foreign military aid actually dropped by 43% in July and August of 2025.
Yeah, that drop triggered a lot of concern. Defense ministers from Sweden and Estonia called it the wrong trajectory, especially with U.S. contributions falling. The burden is shifting squarely onto Europe.
Which is causing some friction inside Europe, isn't it? There's been criticism aimed at France, Italy, and Spain for not doing more.
Well, France has a very specific reason for its hesitation with PURL.
They'd rather invest in Europe's own defense industry.
Exactly. They want to spend European money on European companies, not on American weapons. And this really highlights a growing debate. What's the priority? Immediate supply, which often means U.S. systems, or long-term industrial independence for Europe?
And Germany seems to be trying to do both, which brings us to their really unprecedented new commitment.
This is where things get really interesting. Chancellor Friedrich Merz announced over 11 billion euros in aid for 2026.
And that's on top of the, 40 billion in military aid and 36 billion in civilian aid they've already provided since 2022.
It's a seismic shift, really.
Hmm.
It's all framed under Merz's new, more pragmatic Germany first foreign policy, a real break from Germany's historically restrained post-war posture.
So how is this structured? This isn't just a blank check, right? It's the 10-point plan.
Correct. And the plan is all about deep, long-term industrial cooperation. It goes way beyond just donating weapons.
We're talking about joint ventures, market integration.
And federal guarantees for German companies to actually invest and build facilities in Ukraine, which is a huge deal if you're asking a private company to build a factory in a war zone.
They're even setting up a liaison office in Berlin, the Ukraine Freedom House, and talking about jointly procuring Ukrainian-made drones for Europe's own Sky Shield initiative.
This isn't aid anymore, it's strategic fusion.
Yeah.
It's treating Ukraine's defense industry as an extension of Europe's.
Okay, but here's the part that really changes the game.
The long-range weapons.
Yes, Merz has committed Germany to helping Kyiv jointly produce new long-range weapons with no range restrictions.
Let's just pause on that. No range restrictions.
It explicitly allows Ukraine to defend itself, and I'm quoting here, even against military targets outside its own territory.
So this isn't about selling them existing missiles with strings attached. This is about co-developing and co-producing new capabilities that could, theoretically, hit targets deep inside Russia.
Supply depots, airfields, command centers.
Precisely. The memorandum for this was signed back in May 2025, and it states production can happen in Ukraine or in Germany. Predictably, Russia's reaction was that this hinders peace efforts.
But from Kyiv's perspective, it's a game changer. It provides a real sovereign deterrent capability.
And you have to connect this German pivot to the bigger picture. Merz is reacting to a perceived lack of American focus, to questions about NATO's future effectiveness.
He's stepping into a leadership vacuum.
Absolutely. He's even floated the idea of a European nuclear umbrella with France and Britain. That is an unmistakable signal that Europe is preparing to secure its own future, with or without Washington.
And this isn't just talk. It's being formalized through things like the Coalition of the Willing.
That's the diplomatic framework, right? Led by the UK and France since late 2024, with 35 countries involved. The goal is providing security guarantees to enable a just peace.
And the most concrete thing to come out of that coalition is the planning for the multinational force Ukraine, the MNFU.
This is the future security architecture in practice. It's planned as a reassurance force, but the key detail is that it's designed for deployment after the fighting stops.
Its job would be to deter another attack and help Ukraine rebuild its armed forces.
And the planning is incredibly advanced, even though it's not mandated yet. We're talking 200 military planners from 30 nations.
They've even set up a 3-star command headquarters in Paris already.
Which signals a serious long-term commitment.
Hmm.
But it also raises that critical question. Is a reassurance force that only arrives after a ceasefire a powerful enough deterrent?
Right, and that's where the other, more immediate proposal comes in, the European Sky Shield for Ukraine.
This is a totally separate idea. An integrated air protection zone over western and central Ukraine, operating right now during the conflict.
And crucially, it would be run by a coalition of willing NATO states, but independent of the formal NATO command structure.
To manage the political risk of direct engagement, The plan is ambitious. It involved combat air patrols with up to 120 modern European fighter jets.
F-16s, F-35s, Rafales, operating hundreds of kilometers away from the front lines.
Just to create a protective dome over cities like Kyiv and Lviv, intercepting drones and missiles.
Which, of course, brings up the huge escalation debate.
It does. Proponents say the risk is low. Russia hasn't flown its jets deep into Ukraine since early 2022 anyway. They point to the US and UK shooting down Iranian drones over Israel as a precedent for a limited defensive mission.
But the opponents, they warn the political risk is just too high.
What happens if a European jet gets shot down? Or a pilot is killed? The political fallout in Berlin or Paris could be immense, potentially bringing a government down.
It's the ultimate deterrence dilemma, isn't it? The cost of inaction letting Russia cripple Ukraine's infrastructure is huge.
But the risk of direct, even if defensive, military action is a political red line Europe has been terrified to cross. But the fact they're even planning a 120-jet mission shows how seriously they're considering it.
So when you look at all of this together, PURL, Germany's industrial plan, the MNFU, the Sky Shield proposal, what you're seeing is a massive, historic shift.
It's a move from emergency aid to deep, long-term integrated planning.
Europe is visibly forging a new security framework for Ukraine, one that's independent of shifting U.S. politics. This is Europe trying to take control of its own destiny.
Absolutely. This is continental self-reliance being built in real time.
So what does this all mean for you? The coalition of the willing and this future multinational force are built on the hope of a ceasefire. They're waiting for the fighting to stop. But the planning is already caught in a debate. Is this peacekeeping? Or is it a plan for peace enforcement? And if, as Chancellor Merz warned, Putin's goal is to redraw the map of Europe, how long can Europe wait for that ceasefire before its multinational force has to shift its focus from post-conflict rebuilding to becoming an active deterrent, or maybe even an intervention force? That is the uncomfortable question hanging over all of these plans as we move through 2026. You've been listening to Defense Report by Alex and Aria, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry.
Subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. We'll catch you next time.